While the events of 2020 may have seemed impossible to predict, typically there is one iconic, clairvoyant animated show that managed to get things scarily accurate. 2020. Need I say more? While this year may have felt like a decade, we are only just over halfway through. There seems to have been enough craziness to last a lifetime, and for the most part, this year has been impossible to predict, with a lot of us having to put our plans on hold indefinitely. I guess I'll never go to Disney World. Not only are our plans on hold, but so are film and TV studios with the likes of Tenet and No Time to Die on indefinite hold. But there seems to have been one show that knew everything was coming all along. By now, we all know that the writers of The Simpsons are a bunch of mystics, eerily getting seemingly hundreds of things right over its long run. But some of the things that have been featured on the show feel oddly specific to 2020. While these are usually just jokes or asides, they are all the way too real now. In this video, we'll be looking at some of the scariest predictions The Simpsons made, including global pandemics, video game hype, and even bankruptcies. These are some of the craziest pieces of fiction that came to life. Let's start with the obvious one, President Trump. By now, everyone with an internet connection knows that long before President Trump ran for office, The Simpsons called it. The episode in question, Bart to the Future, aired back in 2000, which is 20 years ago, and makes me feel very old. It shows Bart and Lisa in the future, with Bart being a slacker while Lisa is president of the US. While Lisa is the first female US president in the episode, they do make a reference to her predecessor.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump.
President Trump may have been elected back in 2016, with 2020 potentially being his last year in office, but it is definitely a line that is extremely relevant in 2020. When asked about the line, writer and consulting producer Dan Greeny couldn't remember who initially pitched it or how it arose, but said how the show embraced American culture and how Trump was a part of that. But we all secretly know they have a time machine or a TARDIS or something in the writing room, but they just refuse to tell us. The show also makes reference to Ivanka Trump running for office, but that isn't till 2028. Of course, we couldn't talk about 2020 without mentioning the pandemic that has ripped across the world, COVID-19. You might have heard about it. COVID-19 continues to wreak havoc on our society and change the way we operate for the foreseeable future. And if you asked anyone last year how they foresaw this year turning out, a lot of people wouldn't have suggested a global pandemic. I was personally looking forward to Disney World, but of course the writers at Simpsons aren't the same as us mere mortals, with them predicting a global pandemic. In the season 4 episode Marge in Chains, the show predicts a global flu spreading across the world called Osaka flu, and it is spread by a Japanese factory worker coughing into a package. The two don't share the same name, or even the same type of virus, and the Osaka flu originated from Japan as opposed to the province of Wuhan, but there are some scary parallels between the two. As Springfield begins to panic, they desperately seek a cure, but in doing so, accidentally set off a chain of events which are also strangely similar to 2020. As the residents of Springfield panic and go into a frenzy, they push over a truck, only to release a horde of killer bees. As you may know, earlier in the year, the Asian giant hornet, otherwise known as the much more sinister name murder hornets, were spotted on the western coast of the United States, triggering a great deal of alarm. Not only does the sighting of murder hornets in the US pose a threat to local wildlife, but let's face it, a creature that is known as a murder hornet is somewhat concerning. The threat seems to have been somewhat contained for now, but with the way 2020 is going, I am definitely sleeping with one eye open. The Simpsons may not have called them murder hornets, but to have killer bees in the same episode as a global pandemic is an ominous coincidence.
I'm cured! Ouch!
In terms of 2020 predictions, the Marge in Chains episode is the gift that keeps on giving. As the title refers, Marge is arrested in the episode for accidentally stealing a bottle of bourbon and spends 30 days in prison. Marge's arrest leads to mass riots across Springfield. While the events are very, very different and the beats in the episode are purely satirical, the mass riots due to a controversial arrest have striking parallels to the Justice riots taking place across not only the US, but the world. If the episode had just featured this arrest, then it may not have been enough to compare it to the riots of 2020. But with the inclusion of a global pandemic and killer bees, the coincidences are just too much to not include. A controversial statue in the episode of Marge in Chains is what leads to the riots, with Springfield Park Commission failing to raise enough money for an Abraham Lincoln statue, and instead going for a statue of Jimmy Carter.
He's history's greatest monster!
In fact, the episode ends with Springfield unveiling a Marge statue.
It's beautiful.
which is the best statue you could make, but it actually turns out to be the Carter statue with Marge's hair. So pretty close, I guess. But there is another episode that refers to a controversial statue. In the episode The Telltale Head, Bart cuts off the head of the statue commemorating the town's founder, Jebediah Springfield, in an effort to be popular. Bart eventually returns the head and it is reattached to the statue, but for avid Simpsons watchers, you know the character of Jebediah is a controversial one. Lisa uncovers the truth that Jebediah is actually a literal silver-tongued pirate called Hans Sprungfield, who brawled with George Washington before assuming the name Jebediah Springfield, making him an imposter and false icon. However, Lisa decided to keep Springfield's identity as a secret as she noticed the good he brought out of the local residents. And while Bart didn't take down the head of the statue due to political agenda, like the episode Marge in Chains, the taking down of controversial statues is eerily similar to what's happening today on the back of the Justice Riots. Another moment of clairvoyance from the Simpsons writers comes in the form of them predicting the fate of department store chain JCPenney's. In a 2006 episode of The Simpsons, we see the family at the mall looking at a desolate and derelict JCPenney's store, which in the episode had completely shut up shop. Flash forward 14 years and news coming out in May that the chain had filed for bankruptcy due to the financial implications of the coronavirus. Although it may not be as shocking of a prediction as it first appears, with the chain reportedly financially struggling for over a decade now, it may have been safe to guess that JCPenney's would close down. It also would be a safe bet that the Simpsons writers sold all their penny stocks. Hey yo.
Oh, don't you have any follow-through on anything?
And that there will be several people on Wall Street calling them up to find out what other stocks they should buy or sell.
$25.
Or does that count as insider trading? Another huge effect of COVID-19 are workers leaving the office and working from remote locations. This means companies are becoming even more reliant on video conferencing, leading to platforms such as Zoom rising in popularity and usage, as well as close-ups of your colleague Suzanne while she repeatedly asks if you can hear her, as her cat meows in the background. But that's a very non-specific example. Anyways, video calling may be a commonplace technology now, with almost everyone having access to it, but it was something yet to be discovered in the 90s. But of course, The Simpsons predicted its rise all the way back in 1995. In the season 6 episode Lisa's Wedding, which flashes forward to Lisa's future, we see Lisa and Marge talking over a picture phone, something strikingly similar to Zoom and other video calling platforms. Another thing that episode predicts is World War III, but let's hope that doesn't happen. Another piece of technology that has become ever so popular during 2020 and the global pandemic is the rise of Animal Crossing. With most people stuck inside all day, the sales of Nintendo Switches skyrocketed with them selling out quickly. I am still waiting to get mine, along with many Nintendo games. But the most prevalent game was by far the life simulation game Animal Crossing. With people unable to go out in the real world, fans took to the virtual world and the game has been extremely popular since its release. And while The Simpsons may not have predicted the exact rise of Animal Crossing, they did predict the rise of these life simulation games, with an episode in 1998 referring to a game as Yard Work Simulator. Sounds familiar? While virtual gardening and farm games aren't exactly new, with the popularity of Farmville in the early 2010s, it does feel very relevant to today with Animal Crossing being such a major part of the zeitgeist. But with VR becoming ever more popular, I would be very intrigued to take part in the game of Yard Work Simulator, while my actual yard turns into a mini Mirkwood from The Hobbit. It is safe to say that the last two Star Wars, The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker respectively, have been somewhat controversial amongst its fan base. But one Star Wars outing that has been for the most part universally loved is the Disney Plus original show The Mandalorian, which centers on Pedro Pascal's lone bounty hunter. While recent Star Wars entries in the Star Wars saga, including the prequels, have been accused of moving too far away from its roots, The Mandalorian pays homage to the westerns that inspired the original trilogy, with The Mandalorian centered on a western-style hero in the mold of Clint Eastwood or John Wayne. In particular, the former, who starred in Sergio Leone's masterful Dollars trilogy, a main inspiration for Star Wars. But for cinema aficionados, you would know that in turn, the Dollars trilogy is inspired by samurai culture and the works of Japanese legend auteur Akira Kurosawa. Kurosawa also directly inspired Star Wars, with Lucas taking the main story from Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress as inspiration for A New Hope. The Mandalorian goes back to these roots, and although Lucas isn't the direct creator, his influence is felt in the show. This return was predicted by The Simpsons when Randall Curtis, a parody of Lucas, announces he's going to return to his roots of lifting off samurai and western movies.
I'm going back to my roots.
plots and characters lifted from westerns and samurai films.
While The Mandalorian may have been released in 2019, with a second season underway and more similar Star Wars projects on the horizon, it is still highly relevant in 2020. To finish up, we end on a 2020 prediction The Simpsons got wrong. Dun dun dun. Well, maybe. In the episode Sunday, Cruddy Sunday, which aired back in 1999, The Simpsons predicted a team in red with jerseys that strongly resemble that of the San Francisco 49ers, winning the Super Bowl in Miami. As sports fans will know, the Niners took on the Kansas City Chiefs this year in Miami for Super Bowl 54. But unfortunately for Niners fans, the result was very different, with the Chiefs edging out the California outfit in the fourth quarter and taking the championship back to Kansas. However, for you astute viewers out there, you will have noticed that the Chiefs also wore red, while the Niners wore white at the Super Bowl. So maybe they did get it right after all.
The year 2020 had one unpredictable turn after another, at least from my perspective. But it seems like The Simpsons have managed to make a few predictions which actually ended up coming true. Did this famous cartoon family predict the COVID-19 pandemic? We'll let you know which scenarios they got right and which ones they missed, despite what you might have seen online. In the year 1999, American rock band Smash Mouth released their hit All-Star, which contains the lyrics "My world's on fire, how about yours?", which pretty much sums up the year 2020, but unlike Smash Mouth, this is not the way I like it. Anyway, speaking of the world being on fire, protesters took to the streets across the United States following the tragic loss of George Floyd. Protests broke out all across Minneapolis, which culminated with the police station being set on fire. Naturally, tons of images of the protests and this incident in particular have been circulating on social media, and occasionally accompanied by a screenshot of a specific Simpsons episode. The episode in question is Hello Gutter, Hello Fatter, which tells the story of Homer bowling a perfect game and becoming a local celebrity, only to learn that fame isn't necessarily a good thing. But before Homer found himself in that wacky scenario, he was predictably late to work by an impressive 26 hours. In his mad dash to the nuclear power plant, he was pulled over by Chief Wiggum, and when asked where's the fire, he simply pointed to the police station engulfed in flames. So maybe it's not a perfect prediction of the future, but it's one that came to a lot of fans' minds in light of recent events. Another screenshot that you've probably seen involves the episode Marge in Chains, since some fans are saying it predicted the COVID-19 pandemic, but let's take a closer look. Because while it does have some similarities to real-world events, it isn't a perfect prediction, and here at Screen Rant, we strive for perfection. In the episode, the hot new item is called a juice loosener, and they're shipped to Springfield from Osaka, Japan. Unfortunately, a new flu strain is transported along with the products, and is unleashed upon an unsuspecting populace. There's even an image which shows Kent Brockman reporting on the coronavirus. But that image has been altered because this isn't a case of COVID-19 at all. In fact, that picture isn't even from the same episode. It's from The Fool Monty. In Marge in Chains, the disease is called the Osaka flu, and it originated in Japan, not China. So while there are certain similarities to the real-world pandemic, it isn't 100% accurate when it comes to what really happened. There are some Simpsons fans who don't think it's a coincidence that this fictional show had foreshadowed actual events so many times. But getting the President of the United States right? Well, that's something else. In the episode Bart to the Future, Bart gets a glimpse of what's to come, and unfortunately, he's an out-of-work, broke musician rooming with Ralph Wiggum. Lisa, meanwhile, is the president and says that her predecessor was none other than Donald Trump, who assumed office on January 20th, 2017. It might be tempting to credit this to a coincidence, but that's not what the writers say. This episode aired back on March 19th, 2000, and according to writer Dan Greeny, he thought that a celebrity like Trump becoming president was something that could actually happen. At the time, Dan said he viewed Trump as a kind of lovable, over-the-top character, so he made a natural pick for former president in this episode. Speaking of celebrities, it's hard to find one more universally loved than Tom Hanks, which is why it was huge news when he and his wife Rita Wilson tested positive for coronavirus. Hanks revealed that he had contracted the virus while in Australia and were taking the quarantine process very seriously. But this is also another one where some fans believe it was foreshadowed by The Simpsons. Devoted fans of the franchise will recall that a yellow version of Tom Hanks appeared in The Simpsons movie, which was released in 2007. Hanks appears in a promotion for a new Grand Canyon and says that the US government has lost its credibility, so it's borrowing some of mine. Hanks then goes on to say that if you see me in person, please leave me be. That's good advice in general, but it was doubly important when Hanks was diagnosed with coronavirus. Have I mentioned that 2020 hasn't exactly been the best year ever? Because now we have extra dangerous hornets flying around. These new species of Asian giant hornets appeared in the Pacific Northwest. And of course, they're an invasive species which could damage local wildlife, not to mention humans who are unlucky enough to come across them. Oddly enough, this is another event which was supposedly predicted in the episode Margin Chains, which gave us the Osaka flu COVID-19 connection I talked about earlier. Because the citizens of Springfield get sick, they demand a cure from Dr. Hibbert, who has none to give. When they ransack a truck in search of some placebos, they end up letting loose a swarm of dangerous bees. It's safe to say that this development in The Simpsons and in the real world really stings. Huh? You like that one? Yeah, you do. There's a ton of times that The Simpsons actually got pretty close to predicting real-world events, but some fans just try to force connections when they're not there. You might have seen this image online, which shows Mr. Burns standing in front of the Notre Dame Cathedral of Springfield, of course, when it's on fire. It actually looks like a version of the Disaster Girl meme, and many people who saw this assumed it was from an episode which predicted the Notre Dame du Paris fire of 2019. This devastating blaze did serious damage that could take up to 2 decades to fix completely. And while this was a tragic event, it's not one The Simpsons predicted. See, the Notre Dame Cathedral of Springfield does make an appearance in the episode Husbands and Knives when Marge starts a business and Homer decides to enhance his appearance through surgery to maintain her interest. Some shenanigans later, Marge and Homer are chased by an angry mob and seek refuge in the cathedral, which is decidedly not on fire. Not only that, but Mr. Burns isn't standing in the foreground at all. Fans of Game of Thrones love the show's many twists and turns, and they can all agree that the final season was the most unpredictable of all. Now, whether or not that was a good thing or not, we'll let you decide. But it's safe to say that quite a few fans had an issue with the fact that Daenerys Targaryen lost her mind during the conquest of King's Landing and lit up the city with her dragon, despite the fact that it had already surrendered. This is similar to what happened in the Simpsons episode The Surfsons. It was meant to be a parody of fantasy franchises, including Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, and Dungeons and Dragons. During the episode, the townsfolk get their problem solved and everything is fine, until a dragon burns the village. Lady Gaga is a star who is constantly reinventing herself, so making predictions about her actions is particularly difficult. Who could have foreseen her wearing her now infamous meat dress to the VMAs? Gaga at the time said, "I want to give my fans everything that they deserve, and they do not deserve sweatpants and cigarettes." Lady Gaga starred as herself in the episode Lisa Goes Gaga, and called being a part of The Simpsons one of the coolest things she has ever done. And as you'll see soon, she's done some amazingly awesome things. She performed at the Super Bowl halftime show in 2017 and performed a rousing medley of her hit songs. Of course, her show was over the top, and so was she. Quite literally, Gaga was suspended over the stadium before being lowered down to the stage, which is similar to her performance on The Simpsons. But since she worked on the episode, is this really a case of The Simpsons predicting the future, or did Lady Gaga get her inspiration from her small screen counterpart? In Elementary School Musical, Lisa and her friends watch the news to see who will bring home a Nobel Peace Prize. In preparation for this momentous 4 a.m. television event, the kids had to make bets on who they thought would win, with Martin guessing correctly that economist Jagdish Bhagwati would win the Nobel Prize in that category. But check out the sheet on which the kids placed their bets and you'll see that Milhouse placed his bet in that category on Ben Holstrom. This episode aired on September 26, 2010, and in 2016, Ben Holstrom did win a Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences just as The Simpsons predicted. Everything's coming up, Milhouse! Out of all the times The Simpsons has foreshadowed actual events, this one might have the eeriest timing. Let's look at the episode Monty Burns' Fleeing Circus, which starts out with Springfield burning to the ground after the lard lad disappears and is replaced with a new statue that amplifies the sun's rays. Mr. Burns promises to rebuild the town, but on the condition that he gets to perform a variety show during the Super Bowl. It's not quite Lady Gaga, but hey, they really needed someone to have the town rebuilt. But the most interesting part of this episode isn't Springfield burning down or Mr. Burns coming in to save it. It happens during a conversation between Homer and Marge, when Homer fills a squirt toy with a combination of lemonade and iced tea and says he's going to give Lenny an Arnold Palmer. Of course, Arnold Palmer is both a famous golfer and someone who branded his name to describe this delicious drink concoction. The joke should have been a minor moment, and it would have been if Palmer hadn't passed away just a few hours before the episode aired. Writer and producer Al Jean apologized for the situation and the fact that he was too late to cut the joke from the episode. Although the joke was funny, the timing was downright unsettling.
Since its premiere in 1989, The Simpsons has stood the test of time as one of the greatest television shows in the history of ever! Can you dig it? Not only has the heartfelt satirical series offered plenty of laughs throughout the years, they've given us a lot to think about. For instance, the show has developed a knack for predicting future events. How do the show's writers know all this stuff? Are they psychic? Are they time travelers? Ah! If you take a closer look at these so-called predictions, you'll discover they're more based on reality than you realized. Keep watching to find out how we predict. You just might learn something. See what we did there?
Let's just do this and I can get back to killing you with beer. It's a deal.
And while you're at it, make sure to subscribe to the Screen Rant channel so you can stay up to date with all the great content we're dishing out daily.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump. How bad is it, Secretary Van Houten?
We're broke.
The country is broke.
President Trump. In late 2016, the world was shocked by the news that Donald Trump would be the next president of the United States. Best known for his business strategies and a stint as the main host on NBC's The Apprentice, no one ever expected this reality TV star to make good on his promise and/or threat to run for president. No one, that is, except for the Simpsons writers. In the season 11 episode Bart to the Future, we got a glimpse of a potential future where Lisa Simpson became the first female president. The prediction was made as a throwaway joke in which Lisa comments she's inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump. But in a 2016 interview The Hollywood Reporter conducted with Simpsons writer Dan Graney, he suggests this wasn't so much a prediction as a warning. He went on to say the idea was pitched because it was consistent with the vision of America going insane. Longtime Simpsons showrunner Al Jean gives his own thoughts on the matter. People have somewhat forgotten, but he was talking about running for president then, so it wasn't somebody totally out of the blue. It was a guy who was a punchline name and had presidential aspirations.
Oh, blast. Go to plan B.
Smartwatches. In the season 6 episode Lisa's Wedding, Lisa's run-in with a fortune teller at a Renaissance fair offers her a glimpse into the future, specifically the moment Lisa finds her true love, Hugh Parkfield. The episode features a scene in which Hugh proposes to Lisa, but when his plan goes haywire, he uses his wristwatch communicator to insist that his team go to plan B. It's a briefer than brief moment, but enough to suggest that way back in 1995, The Simpsons had predicted the invention of smartwatches. But when you stop and think about it, the idea of the smartwatch has been seen as far back as Dick Tracy in the 1940s. It was such a cool concept, it inspired countless watch companies to delve into the possibilities of what such a device could achieve. In the 1990s, wristwatch technology was striving towards all kinds of futuristic aspirations, such as the Seiko wrist computer message watch. It only makes sense that The Simpsons would latch onto the idea of a watch that could offer the ability for two-way communication. While the smartwatch wouldn't reach its fullest potential until Apple released their innovative Apple Watch in 2015, there's no doubt the seed had been planted for such an invention long before The Simpsons had suggested it would happen.
Oh, my monsters are beautiful, disco studiful, square rootiful.
Lady Gaga's halftime show. Lady Gaga is one of the most popular musical artists of the 21st century. In 2011, she released her second studio album, Born This Way, which debuted on the top 5 spots of nearly every major music chart. It was only a matter of time before she paid a visit to Springfield, and in the series' 23rd season, she finally got her chance. In the episode entitled Lisa Goes Gaga, Lady Gaga stumbles into the city of Springfield on her way to a concert. After noticing how depressed its inhabitants are, she takes it upon herself to cheer up the city of Springfield with a bombastic performance, donning an absurd, spark-shooting silver suit and flying high above the crowd. It's a hilarious visual, one that becomes even more amazing when you realize Lady Gaga did something very similar in a near identical outfit when she performed at the 2017 Super Bowl halftime show, rappelling down to the stage on a rope. It's par for the course for a performer known for her zany and visually stunning antics, so it would only make sense for The Simpsons to come up with a similar idea a few years prior. Though, to be fair, Lady Gaga might have been directly inspired by the episode when planning her Super Bowl show.
Well, I'm glad some people could resist the lures of the big game.
Oh my god, I forgot the game!
The Super Bowl. Since we're already on the topic of Super Bowls, you might find it interesting that for a brief stretch of time, The Simpsons was notorious for predicting the winners of the game. The episode in question, entitled Lisa the Greek, aired from the period of 1992 to 1994. In it, Homer discovers Lisa's incredible ability to predict which football team will win a game. Naturally, he takes full advantage, exploiting her talents to win some extra money. When the football season ends, Homer tells her their bonding time has come to an end. Lisa is heartbroken, but she makes one final prediction. If she still loves her dad, the Redskins will win the Super Bowl. If she doesn't, the Bills will win.
What you got riding on this game?
My daughter.
What a gambler.
Of course, in the episode, the Redskins win and Homer still has the love of his daughter. A few days later, the Redskins actually did win the Super Bowl. The episode was reworked the following 2 years to feature whichever teams were in the Super Bowl that year. Both times, Lisa made predictions and both times she ended up being right. Al Jean, the Simpsons showrunner at the time, insists the predictions were just dumb luck every time. We think he just doesn't want to betray his writerly aura by admitting he's secretly a huge football fan. Oh, we're on to you, Mr. Jean. Siegfried and Roy. Siegfried Fischbacher and Roy Horn were world-famous Vegas magicians whose performances centered around the use of white tigers and white lions. Siegfried and Roy never actually appeared on The Simpsons, but in the show's 5th season, the writers featured a parody duo inspired by them, Gunther and Ernst. In the episode, Gunther and Ernst are mauled by their white tiger Anastasia as revenge for keeping her in captivity. This moment was mirrored in real life a decade later when Roy was attacked by one of his tigers during a live performance. He survived the injuries, but their show was closed not long after. Now, let's face it, people, if you work with tigers on a regular basis, your chances of being injured are bound to go up tremendously. It's just the reality of the situation. It doesn't matter if you're a zookeeper or a talented magician, you're fiddling around with the natural order of things, and sooner or later, that tiger's gonna start looking to you as a snack instead of a pal. All the Simpsons writers had to do was pay attention to the absurdity of the real-life situation, as they often did, and call it as they saw it. While the circumstances surrounding Roy's accident are indeed unfortunate, at the end of the day, they're not much of a surprise.
Oh, I'd love to see New York. We could all go with the bus company's special Super Sitter fare.
$9? This one's on me.
September 11th. This might be the creepiest prediction on our list. This one showed up in the season 9 premiere, which aired in September 1997. In it, Homer's best friend Barney snatches Homer's car and leaves it in New York City. Homer and his family make the trek up to the Big Apple to get it back. When trying to decide the best and cheapest option to get up to New York, Lisa notices a magazine that advertises a $9 bus fare on the cover. Next to the large number 9 is a silhouette of the World Trade Center, which looks suspiciously like the number 11. When the New York Times asked showrunner Al Jean if he could explain this one, he replied, "That one is a completely bizarre, strange thing." In 2010, however, executive producer Bill Oakley said that while he would grant the magazine cover was eerie, the number 9 was chosen because it was a comically cheap fare. The Simpsons wasn't the only show on Fox making creepy 9/11 predictions either. The X-Files spin-off The Lone Gunman's pilot episode featured a storyline where a hijacked plane is aimed towards the World Trade Center. Oof. You know what? Let's just move on to the next topic. This is too much.
campers! How you doing?
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god! It's Mick Jagger and Keith Richards! Ah!
The Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones didn't make their first official guest appearance on The Simpsons until season 14 in the episode How I Spent My Strummer. But that didn't stop the show from making references to the band in earlier episodes. Once again, the 1995 episode Lisa's Wedding seems to have a knack for calling future events, similar to the smartwatch gag. This joke was a quick throwaway. As Lisa and her fiancé lay in bed, chatting the day away, you'll notice a poster up on the wall behind them. It reads, The Rolling Stones Steel Wheelchair Tour 2010. What? How did they know the Rolling Stones would still be up and running in 2010? Sans wheelchairs. This prediction is easier to explain than most. The Rolling Stones have been active as a band since they formed in the 1960s. They revolutionized rock and roll, and they've been consistently churning out incredible material ever since. It's in their blood. In the mid-90s, they were in the midst of touring their Voodoo Lounge album, and both Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were in their early 50s at the time. If they hadn't already called it quits by that point, there was no reason to believe they wouldn't still be touring together for the next decade or so.
Hey, Dolph, take a memo on your Newton. Beat up Martin. Bah!
Autocorrect. One of the many classic punchlines in Simpsons lore wasn't actually spoken out loud by any of the show's characters. In the season 6 episode Lisa on Ice, Kearney, one of the show's bullies, turns to his buddy Dolph during an assembly and asks him to make a note on his Apple Newton. The Newton was one of the earliest models of personal digital assistants, also known as PDAs. And no, we're not talking about that kind of PDA.
Hey, public display.
Yeah, what's with the love thing?
Released in the early 90s, the device was notorious for its buggy handwriting recognition feature. When Kearney asks Dolph to write down the note, beat up Martin, the device incorrectly translates it to eat up Martha. Later on in Apple's history, when they were developing the iPhone's autocorrect feature, this fateful moment was a big inspiration for them later on. According to former senior vice president of iOS software, Scott Forstall, Apple staff was constantly quoting the moment to one another as a way of ensuring they got it absolutely right. According to Forstall, in the hallways at Apple, and while we were talking about the keyboard, you would always hear the words, eat up Martha. So in this case, it wasn't a prediction as much as it was The Simpsons calling Apple out for their shoddy work and inspiring them to do better.
Old lady from Titanic, you stink!
Disney acquires Fox. This prediction was made on an episode entitled When You Dish Upon a Star, which aired back in 1998. You might recall this fan favorite. In it, Homer Simpson becomes best friends with Alec Baldwin, Kim Basinger, and Ron Howard. At the end of the episode, Ron Howard makes a pitch about a killer robot driving instructor that travels back in time for some reason. When the studio head seems like he's going to take a hard pass, Ron throws in Homer's idea about a talking pie to sweeten the deal. He ends up with bags of money. But hold on, let's rewind a little bit. Did you notice that sign on the studio lot? The one that says 20th Century Fox, a division of Walt Disney Co.? While the news that Disney was indeed buying a portion of 21st Century Fox wouldn't be announced for another 20 years, it seems a bit crazy that they called it, right? How else could they have known this way back when, unless they had crazy future predicting powers? Well, hold your horses, people. Turns out there's a logical explanation for this one, too. Past Simpsons showrunner Al Jean says this is another great example of the kind of forward thinking their writer's room was notorious for. It happens, there's always mergers. It seemed logical, you know? The God Particle. Simon Singh, the author of The Simpsons and Their Mathematical Secrets, called the series the most mathematical show on primetime television in history. And for good reason. In the 1998 episode The Wizard of Evergreen Terrace, Homer very nearly predicted the mass of the elementary particle, the Higgs boson, also known as the God Particle, more than a decade before the true answer was discovered. As he is working out a problem on chalkboard, you'll notice a complex equation. According to Singh, that equation predicts the mass of the Higgs boson, and if you work it out, you get the mass of a Higgs boson that's only a bit larger than the nanomass of a Higgs boson actually is. Now, we're sure there's a perfectly logical explanation for how Homer discovered this, right? So, the explanation for this one is, well, it's... okay, fine, we admit it. Maybe The Simpsons is an amazing future-predicting show, and all its writing staff have magic powers and can time travel and all that nonsense. We don't know how they do it, and we can't explain it. But let's Just accept it and acknowledge that this show is absolutely brilliant in every way. Can we just do that? Please.
The Simpsons have become better known for their uncanny way of predicting the future than the actual comedy in the series, and it's almost become a given point that if anything happens in the world, The Simpsons already called it. And so, we are going to take a look at their predictions for 2021, and the surprising amount that they've already managed to get right, and the worrying one still yet to happen. We'll also take a look at a number of other predictions that could still come true and generally at what's in store for us. Let's go.
Hey, everybody, an old man's talking.
First off the bat is the recent petrol shortage in the UK, which caused many motorists to head to the pumps to stock up on fuel and store it in anything that they had on hand, even items such as empty plastic water bottles. And there have been multiple images of drivers pumping petrol into jerry cans lying in their trunks. Now, while The Simpsons didn't predict a shortage in the UK, many people on the internet were quick to see the similarities between a moment on the show and the real-life events. In the 2010 episode, Lisa Simpson, This Isn't Your Life, Homer purchases 1,000 gallons of fuel and pours it freely into his trunk as he runs out of room for it, all in a bid to claim a specific promotional toy for Maggie. As we mentioned, this isn't a direct reference to the petrol crisis, but you can definitely see the similarities, although no one would be stupid enough to put it directly in the trunk or the boot as they say in the UK, would they? One of the biggest news stories for this year, out of a lot to choose from to be honest, is the space race going on between the billionaires. In particular, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson, with both Bezos and Branson taking trips up to space this year. However, while Branson may have only gone up in 2021, The Simpsons called him making a trip to space all the way in 2014 with the episode The War of Art.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Now, while The Simpsons don't make a direct reference to Branson or call him out by name, this link is a lot less contentious, and it has to be said that the animated billionaire looks a lot like Branson. Admittedly, he looks a lot less laid back in his actual trip to space, but you have to hand it to The Simpsons. Another correct prediction. Although admittedly, Branson founded Virgin Galactic all the way back in 2004, so maybe it was just some educated guesswork on The Simpsons' behalf. Still impressive though. But just a side note, Homer managed to go up in space before all three of these guys, huh? Billionaires, 0. Regular guys, 1. Okay, this is another one that is not a direct reference, but it's too funny and coincidental not to put in this video. Texas Senator Ted Cruz went down in infamy after taking a vacation to Cancun while vast numbers of people across the state experienced power outages, no heat, and no water following a huge winter storm, and on top, of course, a still raging pandemic. Cruz quickly faced some heat following his decision and made his return to the state, but not before the damage was done. Similarly, The Simpsons' resident politician, Mayor Quimby, gets embroiled in the same sort of controversy. In the 1993 episode, Margin Chains, an epidemic hits the town of Springfield, causing Mayor Quimby to abandon his people and take flight to the Bahamas, all while pretending to still be at home. In a televised address, Quimby says,
People of Springfield, because of the epidemic, I have cancelled my vacation to the Bahamas.
Before, of course, being interrupted by a man playing a steel drum. As satire goes, whew, it's pretty close. By now, you will certainly be aware that The Simpsons called the Trump presidency, although it was admittedly Joe Biden and not Lisa Simpson to take President Trump's place after the election.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump.
However, the outfit President Lisa Simpson wears is very similar to a real-life outfit worn at the inauguration. President Lisa is seen wearing a purple outfit fitted with her trademark string of pearls around her neck and circular white earrings, and it is eerily similar to the outfit worn by Vice President Kamala Harris as she was sworn into office. Even the wavy hairstyle is kinda similar. I guess the crystal ball wasn't fully clear when The Simpsons called this one. Speaking of the inauguration, seeing as the inauguration had to be a little bit different due to the pandemic, actor Tom Hanks hosted TV special Celebrating America, which is a star-studded event and had many different speeches on inauguration night. Hanks was likely picked due to his level and lovable demeanor, something that The Simpsons know all too well. That's because, in the Simpsons movie, Hanks provides a cameo to address the nation for an advert for the Grand Canyon and says,
"The U.S. government has lost its credibility, so it's borrowing some of mine."
Let's face it, Tom Hanks is America's grandpa after all.
Did you see that?
While these predictions, or coincidences, whatever you want to call them, have come true, one prediction made by The Simpsons for 2021 that thankfully has not come true yet, anyway, is Doomsday. In The Simpsons' 31st Halloween special, Treehouse of Horrors 31, Homer falls asleep and misses the election, and wakes up to find Springfield turned into an apocalyptic wasteland with robots destroying the town. Now, while Doomsday did not strike on Inauguration Day, there is still some time in the year for the apocalypse to happen, so let's just hope they actually got one wrong for a change. Alright, moving away from the predictions particular to 2021 and just a couple of predictions made by The Simpsons for our future in general.
See all that stuff in there, Homer? That's why your robot never worked.
One of them is that robots will rise up and turn on us just like they did when The Simpsons made a trip to Itchy and Scratchy Land. Now, while The Simpsons are by no means the first to call a robot uprising, it is still a prediction they made which could come true, especially seeing how Boston Dynamics treat their robots. I mean, it's only a matter of time before they strike back, right? But with Amazon soon launching their new robot, Astro, I could honestly see that guy turning on us. Like, not necessarily physically, but you know that robot's gonna snitch on us and tell Jeff Bezos every time we look at a mop on Amazon or something. I'm pretty sure my Google Nest Hub has already turned on me and just plays dumb every time I tell her to do something. Oh yeah, I'm on to you, Google. Oh, I am on to you. Another technological development seen in The Simpsons is holographic mail. Now, while this is yet to come true, with hologram technology improving and volumetric videos being a thing, perhaps we will get holographic mail in the near future as well. I mean, didn't Kanye West gift Kim Kardashian a hologram video of her father for her birthday? If we are close to getting hologram mail, then we are one step closer to Star Wars and getting that lightsaber. Similarly, hover cars and hover bikes seen in The Simpsons could be something that's also just around the corner, with there being countless tests on flying cars, air taxis, and even jetpacks. Driving through the air is becoming closer and closer from being something from the future to something of the now. Of course, again, The Simpsons were not the first to predict hover cars, and it's been a sci-fi trope for some time now. It is yet again another one of their predictions, and let's face it, I would not be surprised if Elon turns around and releases a flying Tesla out of nowhere. Again, this last one is a little bit of fun, but speaking of all these billionaires, one of the most infamous episodes of The Simpsons comes when Mr. Burns blocks out the sun so he can have a monopoly on energy. With the 3 billionaires making their trips to space, perhaps they will build some satellite that'll block out the sun and harness its power like some James Bond villain or something. Of course I'm kidding. Or am I, huh? I am, I think. And finally, with Big Ben constantly having work done to it, and with less people able to read analog clocks, I would not be surprised if one day they take the clock face out of Big Ben, put it in a museum, and make the tower digital like in The Simpsons.